And you know, government is in perpetuity. The government of Moi then and the current government and even the past one is the same. So they need, these are our people. We need to help our people to acquire relevant documents, and they should not be pushed out by KFS. Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I support.
Thank you, Senator Onyonka Richard. Momoima.
Mr. Speaker, thank you for giving me the opportunity to support my brother Osotsi for raising such a critical issue. Mr. Speaker, as you know that me and you and a few members who are in this house have been in this parliament for many years, and we are constantly discussing the issue of our land, the land question in Kenya. Mr. Speaker, I think it has come to the right time now. I think the Senate, I believe that if you look around on what is happening to our politics and the issues which are coming out and they're outstanding, Mr. Speaker, I think it's necessary now for us to look at the Ndungu report. It's okay for us to look at the Kiliku report. It's important for us to look at all the reports that have discussed and raised critical issues about the land question in Kenya. Mr. Speaker, leaving that alone, and I have to make my declaration here that I seem to have a matter which is affecting me personally, but is being handled by a governor in one of the counties in our republic. And what is happening now, Mr. Speaker, is that when a governor comes after the governor who was there before has left, that governor who comes in then changes the rules and sets up ad hoc committees, does not regard the law, and runs around all over the place trying to tell his people he's trying to reclaim land that was stolen by the grabbers. And yet in reality, Mr. Speaker, some of the residents on this land are actually very poor squatters who have lived on that land for more than 25 years. Some of this land was actually annexed and allocated fairly. Some of it has been actually grabbed, as the public is aware. And yet, I believe that our government hasn't been very clear on land policy, on land demarcation, on which land we must keep strictly for agricultural purposes and what needs to be kept strictly for development in terms of building infrastructure or building houses or building railways and all that. I think, Mr. Speaker, instead of us looking at this matter in a piecemeal manner, in other words, instead of us looking at the issue that Honorable Sosi has talked about, there could be one issue that I could bring from Kisii County, where I come from. You find Honorable Mtata is going to talk about land that has been grabbed from the airport of Busia. I really think that, and I'm happy that the majority leader is here. Mr. Majority Leader, I would like to make a very special request. If you can discuss with the President and ask him, we actually need a very special commission that would go through the Republic of Kenya and come up with the resolutions which are implementable, which will remove the amount of anger and the amount of conflict that exists in our country because of the land question. I believe that it is necessary for us to seriously look at this issue so that we can try and limit or reduce the amount of anger, desperation, and frustration that many of our voters have, and make sure that we have a reasonable land policy so that if somebody wants to come to Kenya and be a squatter, Mr. Speaker, then this person can actually buy land without having any question about it. Mr. Speaker, finally, if you go to a country like Rwanda today, if you wanted to buy a piece of land, you can actually do it from Nairobi. You do it online. You check on the piece of land, they give you the land, they have a portal, you access, the pictures come on your phone, you go to the Attorney General's office, and it tells you whether you can buy that land or you cannot. Mr. Speaker, I don't understand why in Kenya we can't do that. And you know who set up the system in Rwanda? It is Kenyan surveyors and Kenyan engineers. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Senators, I want now to recognize the school visiting this Senate. Later on, I'll give two more senators to make comment on the same statement. I can see there is a lot of interest on this statement touching on land issues. Honorable Senators, you have visiting teachers and students from the Raila'S School in Nairobi County. In the public gallery, we have 86 Form 4 students accompanied by 3 teachers from the Raila'S School in Nairobi County who are in the Senate on an education tour. Honorable Senators, in our usual tradition of receiving and welcoming visitors to Parliament, extend a warm welcome to them, and on behalf of the Senate and on my own behalf, wish them a fruitful visit. I thank you. Senator Mugeni Eric Okongo.
First, Mr. Speaker, allow me on behalf of the Senator for Nairobi, Senator Sifuna, to welcome students from Lenana School to the Senate. Mr. Speaker, in our days when we used to attend O levels and aspire to go to A levels, Lenana High School is one of the schools that used to attract a lot of interest from students, and only the ones who are top used to make it to Lenana. So I'm proud to today welcome students from Lenana High School, and I'm happy that they have shown keen interest to visit the Senate so that they can understand the operations of Parliament. Lenana School is a very promising school, and I have no doubt, Mr. Speaker, that perhaps in the midst of these students, in the years ahead, may arise a senator for Nairobi. So welcome to the Senate. Mr. Speaker, this issue that has been raised...
Senator Okongo, maybe let me get to know whether there are maybe other senators interested to welcome the students, and then I'll give you the opportunity to make your comments on the statement. Senators, who is Senator Mwaruma?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of delegation of Nairobi, Senator Sifuna and Senator Tabitha Mutinda, allow me to join you in welcoming the students of Lenana School to the Senate, and Karen Nyamu too, the delegation for Nairobi, to welcome you to the Senate of Kenya. As you may be knowing, in Kenya we have a bicameral parliament where we have the Senate, where we are, and the other house is the National Assembly. And what we do basically is we protect devolution. And I would like to encourage you to work hard so that we find a way one time to the Senate of Kenya. Here we make laws, laws that govern our country, because for you to run a country, you require laws and policies. Feel welcomed, Lenana School. I know most people would want to come to Lenana School because it's one of the top schools. I had a standard 8 class student who wanted to really come to Lenana School, but he ended up in Maseno School this year from 1. So feel welcome and learn as much as you can. Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. There is also Senator Siengo Karunda Beth. The Nana School is a school that everybody would like to be associated with. So I'll give us maybe 2 more senators.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. Let me add my voice on welcoming Lenana School to this house. On behalf of the women, I know in the these boys have mothers at home. I extend a warm welcome to the students and encourage them to set goals that they want to achieve in life, and more so, to be very ambitious. In this house, Mr. Speaker, sir, we are people who have excelled in different fields in life, and these students can also do so. They can excel and they can do very well. And there is a saying that goes that the young people are the leaders of tomorrow. They can start now and remain leaders throughout their lives. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. I welcome them to the Senate.
Honorable Senators, I was to challenge you this afternoon whether Nombonde went to Renana High School, but luckily I've got one senator for Homa Bay County, old boy of Renana High School.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I join you and the House to welcome the second batch of students from Lenana School, also called Changes. These young men, once they complete school, they will be called Libons because they will have been processed through one of the finest institutions of learning in this republic. Mr. Speaker, this House has never had a shortage of Libons. As I mentioned yesterday when I welcomed the batch that was here yesterday, the former Deputy Speaker of this House and the current Cabinet Secretary for Interior, Professor Kindiki, is a Libon, is an old boy of Lenana School. The current Governor of Nairobi, who has also been the Senator of Nairobi in this House, is a Changerian or a Libon. Mr. Speaker, yours truly is a Libon who was in James House in Block 5. And Mr. Speaker, Block 5 used to be a bit close to Riruta. So our hobby in the evenings was to go and grab some mutura from Riruta. But I am not encouraging the boys to do so, because if they do those kind of activities, they will end up becoming politicians like me, and they will come to this House. Mr. Speaker, I want to encourage the Libons that are in the gallery through you, that I hope that amongst them, I will get my lawyer in future. I hope that amongst them, I will get my doctor in future. Because, Mr. Speaker, I don't trust the doctors in this House to treat me, particularly Dr. Senator, the whip, the senator for Kakamega. I cannot trust him with an injection. And so, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Kajwang, you're out of order, total out of order. We will not discuss the conduct of the senator for Kakamega. At least if he could be here to defend himself, it wouldn't be better. But you know, you want to attack him because he's not around. So please desist from that route. Actually, withdraw that statement that you can't trust him. You are on national TV.
Mr. Speaker, with a lot of respect, I withdraw. I've spent the entire morning sitting next to the bullfighter, so I think he has infected me in a way. But I hope, I hope that the batch that is here will be our doctors in future, our lawyers, our engineers, our software engineers. They'll be the ones providing solutions to the challenges that this continent and this globe faces as far as climate change is concerned. They'll be the team that will take us to the metaverse. They'll be the team that will carry Elon Musk's ambition and the ambitions of other billionaires, that there could be life outside this planet and that we can explore and humanity can master the universe. Mr. Speaker, I want to encourage the boys from Lenana. The reason why it is called Changes, it changes people. They come in as villagers, but after 4 years, they are refined gentlemen. I want to encourage them to change from villagers, not to think of themselves as Luos, Kikuyus, Kambas, because this is a national school that admits boys from all corners of the country, that after 4 years, let them see themselves as Kenyans. And Mr. Speaker, I cannot fail to say this. Lenana is a school that has produced men, real men, not those other men who toss up and down, real men. And that is why Lenana was the best school when it came to rugby, Mr. Speaker, until the schools from Western Kenya came along. And because of the diet that they are fed on, the schools in Western Kenya, they are eating cassavas and yams and such starchy things for breakfast, while at Lenana, they are eating Yorkshire pudding and such exotic things. That is the reason why rugby moved from Lenana School, from St. Mary's School, from Nairobi School. I went to Musingu, where Sifuna went, and went to a few other miscellaneous schools in Western Kenya on account of the diet that they undertake. Mr. Speaker, I finalize by marveling that in this House, in this Parliament, Mr. Speaker, I have met alumni of very great schools, Alliance, Stare, I've met Bomerians, I've met people from Kotet, I've met people from all the choice schools, even people from Yale, like Senator Eddie Okech. I am yet to meet in the corridors of parliament, even though I meet a lot of them in the corridors of county assemblies. I am yet to meet someone from Nairobi school who has made it to parliament, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Nairobi school is our perennial rival, and on that account, there have been more senators, MPs, cabinet secretaries from Lenana school as compared to those from Nairobi school. Mr. Speaker, I welcome the boys and wish them success in the upcoming exams. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Kajwang, these miscellaneous schools also have brought the senators to this house. I think I'm one of those who went to the miscellaneous schools. But we thank God. Let us hear Senator Kenyuri Esther, who is closer to them injuries.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I also want to join my colleague senators in welcoming the students from Changes. Back in my days in high school, I was in the Kenya High School, alias the Bomerians. Those were our brother schools for a very long time until I came out here. So to the boys in Lenana School, you have a very golden opportunity. Kenya is a land of all possibilities, and you've been privileged to be in that good school that other people have not had the opportunity to. And remember, you've actually made it to this Senate, so it's gone down in history. So when you go out there, do not disappoint the rest. And I want to differ with my good senator, Senator Kajwang from Homa Bay, on discouraging you from being politicians. Politics and political leadership needs a test of smart brains with clarity of mind, so that we also change how things are done in these platforms. So before you pursue your other ambitions, I also want to encourage you. I'm a young person like you are. I was in one of those privileged schools from a very humble background, but I've transited all the way to this national platform. So I want to encourage you that you have all the chances you do to explore your abilities and shine in this country, not only in your different careers that you want to take up, but also in political leadership. Education is the only other thing that makes all of us equal. So in this house, you can actually present your ideas so long as you sell your policies well to the people. So I want to discourage you from solely listening to what the good senator from Homa Bay is saying, that Kenya does not need more politicians. We need political leadership so that we sort out most of these challenges we are facing as a country. You're welcome. Thank you.
Senator Richard Onyonka.
Ndugu Speaker, ningependa kusema asante sana kwa kunipa hii nafasi ili nichangie hili jambo la kuwakaribisha wanafunzi wa shule ya upili ya Lenana. Vile nimesikia ndugu yangu Mheshimiwa Kajwang amesema, mimi nilikuwa na bahati, sikuenda Lenana, lakini nilikuwa na bahati kusoma na ndugu yake ambaye anaitwa Joe Koto Kajwang, ambaye tulisoma naye katika shule ya upili ya Kisii. Baada hapo nadhani tulikuja tukakutana chuo kikuu cha Nairobi, na hapo ndio tulikutana na nduguye mkubwa Kajwang senator na yeye pia. Kwa hivyo ingawa tulienda kwa zile mashule ambako hata ukitafuta kwa runinga hazipatikani, tulijaribu sana tukakuja mpaka tumefika hapa mahali tupo. Jambo la pili ningependa kumwambia Mheshimiwa Kajwang na hawa wanafunzi wako hapa, sababu nimelazimika kuzungumza kwa lugha ya Kiswahili ni kwa sababu ningependa kuwasihi nyinyi vijana wadogo kuwa lugha ya taifa ni muhimu. Na hii lugha ya taifa kokote ambako utakuwa unatembea nchini Kenya, hata kwa ulimwengu, mtu akikuuliza wewe unatoka wapi, unasema Kenya, jambo la kwanza anakuuliza ni habari gani. Kwa hivyo ningependa kuwasihi wale wanafunzi ambao wanasoma katika shule ya upili ya Lenana, shule yenu ina jina nzuri, shule yenu ina heshima, kuna viongozi wengi sana wamesoma kwa hiyo shule yenu. Kwa hivyo ningependa kuwasihi nyinyi muwe na heshima, muhakikishe kuwa mna nidhamu, muendelee kufanya vizuri, kwa sababu sasa mababa wenu hawana utajiri mwingi. Ukisoma sasa, ile akili ambayo unatoka kwa masomo ndio inakupa nafasi ukatembea ulimwengu. Nadhani mmenielewa, na ningependa kuwaambia kuwa ikiwezekana, angalia yale mawaidha ambayo tunatumia kwa hili jumba, standing orders, angalia katiba yetu, our constitution, ili muanze kujizoesha kujua ni lipi ambalo unataka kufanya ukitaka kuwa unatafuta kazi ya, kama ni kazi ya MCA ama unataka kuwa mbunge ama ukiwa seneta. Ndio ukifika hapa utapata kuwa unajua na unaelewa ni lipi ambapo tunafanya kwa hili jumba. Ningependa kuambia kuwa asante kwa kufika, na vile nimekaa hapa, Mheshimiwa Kajwang' amesema kuwa atanunulia soda kabla nyinyi hamjaondoka. Asante sana ndugu Speaker.
Senator Okech, are you saying you also at Renana School?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I did not go to Raila'S school, but I went to a very pretty good school. And I went to Friends School Kamusinga in Bungoma, and I can see even the faces of the students there getting excited, because Friends School is a very good school. You know, our motto was use common sense. And, you know, Kajwang' has struggled so much, Senator Kajwang' has struggled so much with his own conflicted self of why should he stay in politics or should he go back and practice law. And I can assure you that that's an issue of common sense. Common sense because Kajwang' has been very consistent in advising Changerians who have been able to come to this house not to go to politics. What I wanted to tell my friends, I think that I'm also very close to you age-wise, and sometimes I do have the privilege to be also close with you in terms of just experiences. You know, I can hear some whispers behind me, but that's fine. What I wanted to tell you is that you don't forget where you have come from. I think sometimes when you are balkanized into a group of students from Lenana, sometimes you can forget your backgrounds. What makes you today is extremely the backgrounds that you come from. And if you look at your own individual backgrounds, you have got challenges and opportunities that you have faced in the past. And being in Lenana, therefore, means that your future is extremely important. And what I wanted to encourage you to do is that you don't arrive. Lenana is not the last place you want to go. The world should be your stage of play, but with regards to politics, I want to urge you to go and pursue all your dreams. Go and pursue your dreams and be whatever you want to be in this world. Be lawyers, be great doctors, be great engineers, but always remember that all those careers that we pursue them so that we can be able to contribute to the society. And the biggest contribution you can have in the society is contribution to have your seat where decisions about resources are made. And the decisions about resources are always made in politics. So politics is decisions about making resources that will affect you, your children in the future, your families you have left at home, and it's the best science you can ever have. So don't be lured by Senator Kajwang' to forget politics. What is affecting this country is that sometimes politicians we have had bad manners, and what I will encourage you is that you groom good values, you have clear vision about your lives, so that when you become a politician, you become a politician who cares about their people truly. And as I leave you, Jomo Kenyatta said that responsibility of nation building, which is what you're going to be participating on in the future, is going to be given to reliable custodians with good values. Be that custodian wherever you'll go, and especially when you find yourself in politics. I thank you and wish you well as you visit with us. And in case Kajwang' forgot his wallet, he can consult with me as a neighbor, and I'll be able to show that you get your soda as you go home. Thank you so much.
Honorable Senators, I would like to acknowledge the presence in the Speaker's Gallery this afternoon and a delegation from the British Army Training Unit in Kenya, popularly known as BATUK. The delegation is undertaking a standard tour in the Senate. I request each member of the delegation to stand when called out so that we may be acknowledged in the Senate tradition. 1, Major David Kalawa. 2, Warrant Officer 2, Vesi George. 3, Sergeant Galang Sudesh. Koplo Vakasegu Una. Lance Koplo Parvis Robin. Lance Koplo Lamosa Daniel. Mrs. Eunice Ichung'wa. Mrs. Jane Oyugi. And the last but not the least, Mr. Brian Ochieng. Honorable Senators, in the usual tradition of receiving and welcoming visitors to Parliament, I extend a warm welcome to the delegation and on behalf of the Senate and on my own behalf, wish them a fruitful visit. I thank you. Let me give the majority leader to welcome our visitors for 2-3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I join you in welcoming the visiting delegation from the British Army. Mr. Speaker, I am a big fan of the poetry works of Rudyard Kipling, and I love the way he refers to them as Tommies and bootnecks. It's good to have them with us this afternoon because I know members of the Foreign Relations, National Security and Foreign Relations Committee have gone on a long digging spree many a times this session and previously, Mr. Speaker, to ensure that we have a long-standing relationship between Kenya and the UK with specific reference to the work that British Army do around the area of Nanyuki, Mr. Speaker, on this specific mission that brings this visiting delegation to this country, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if you have been a visitor to Nanyuki, I know you can't be because that's your home area. Therefore, on many occasions, either for one reason or the other, when you're not at home in Meru, you find your way to Nanyuki. But the likes of Senator Eddie Okech and the rest of us who come from the western side of the country, whenever we visit Nanyuki, Nanyuki is testament of the thriving town of Nanyuki, is testament of the good work that this organization continues to do, Mr. Speaker. It's built out of, many businesses have been built out of either trading or any forms of relationship that exist, Mr. Speaker, between the local community and the BATUK organization, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, to have them visit us is a great honor. I know, Mr. Speaker, for a fact that it hasn't been extremely rosy. Last few years, there have been difficulties and difficult conversations. As you'd expect of any human relationship, Mr. Speaker, there are times where things arise, but the most important thing is how you're able to amicably resolve and ensure that the long-standing relationship that Kenya enjoys with the UK continues. I know that our colleagues in the National Assembly did a tremendous work in ensuring that before renewing, because this cooperation agreement is renewed, I think almost 3 or every 5 years, that there are certain terms and conditions that were put in place to ensure that you protect both the soldiers and the local community, so that any matters that had previously arisen, based on the experience of the previous years, you're able to forestall and ensure that the soldiers that come to Kenya do enjoy their time. If you read, Mr. Speaker, the journals, and I'm a favorite at this, of many soldiers, they give testament of whatever they studied and their experience in Nanyuki and how it impacted on their, later on in their careers as soldiers and army men and women, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, this is a relationship that we need to guard jealously and ensure that it's mutually beneficial to both Kenya and the United Kingdom. Therefore, I do hope, Mr. Speaker, that in the duration of their stay, they will get to enjoy and learn all that there is to learn about this parliament. If they have many other questions, they're always welcome to interact with members of parliament that are here, the senators that are here, and those that are of the National Assembly, so that they can have a fulfillment of what they sought to do when they set on their calendar and programs to visit Parliament of Kenya this afternoon, Mr. Speaker. So I join you on behalf of our colleagues and all senators in the House this afternoon to welcome them and wish them a fruitful stay. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Let us have the chairperson, Standing Committee on National Security and Foreign Relations.
Not on this one.
Yeah?
Not on this.
Okay, Senator Lelegwe, Steve Lumbesi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I join you and the Majority Leader and the rest of my colleagues to welcome the British Training Unit officers to the Senate. Mr. Speaker, sir, the British Training Unit is also a unit that trains in Samburu. And I wish to thank them and appreciate their efforts in working with the communities in Samburu and making sure that the marginalized communities get services. And I appreciate the good services they're giving the people by providing them water, building schools, and also doing medical camps to offer services, medical services to those communities. And these communities have been forgotten a long time ago by governments of Kenya, and I thank them because they're really doing good work in the communities. One thing that I need to urge them is that when they do this corporate social responsibility, which they are doing in Samburu and other parts of Kenya, is they should make sure that they involve the communities and also the leadership in those regions. And I appreciate because they have been inviting the leadership of the counties they operate in, and when they are making their decisions, and I encourage them to be making such decisions so that we make sure that communities get services and also they get humble time in doing their trainings in those regions. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. I had promised to give one more senator to make a comment on the statement by Senator Ososi. So let me keep my promise. Senator William Cheptumo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to support the statement by the Senator Ososi on the issue of decassetment. Mr. Speaker, if you listen to all the members who spoke to this particular statement, it's like this is a challenge that is arising in almost every county. In fact, all the members who spoke to this statement have very specific issues and concerns in their counties. And Mr. Speaker, I would like to agree with the other members who say that I think there is need for the committee to look at this more holistically. I heard Honorable Onyonga requesting the majority leader to speak to the president about this issue. I think that is not the way to go. Mr. Speaker, the procedure normally is that these are matters that this House can take up, and in our counties, and they go to the ministries, the ministry in charge, then they do what we normally call the cabinet memoranda, then the cabinet approves, then it now comes to the House for adoption or for approval. So I want to agree in Baringo, for example, Mr. Speaker, we have several schools and institutions which are actually built in those areas that are considered as forest areas. But practically speaking, Chair or Speaker, those are several acres of land. in schools, in colleges, and so on. And that yet when you go to the Ministry of Forestry, you discover they are actually gazetted forest areas. I think it is important that we really degazzette these areas and be able to issue titles to these institutions. I think it is a critical issue which we need to do. So that, Mr. Speaker, some schools, for example, or colleges, occupy those areas. They have no title deeds, and all the time they receive threats from the Ministry of Forest and with the rangers and so on. It is high time, I think, we need, so that even when we talk about now building, putting up or planting 15 billion trees, we should be able to do so even in those schools, but not as gazetted areas or as gazetted forest. So, Mr. Speaker, I think it is important. Then the other aspect, Mr. Speaker, as I conclude, is there are areas which are not gazetted, which have been degazetted, given to institutions, and the original owners of those particular lands, Mr. Speaker, are not actually compensated. And the understanding between the government then and the occupants of those areas is to be given land elsewhere. And Mr. Speaker, those days it was interesting because you find a politician from a certain area given a list of people to be allocated land. And that MP or minister takes the whole portion of land given to those people. So I think, again, those people who had been promised to be given, to be compensated and given allocation of land, they are now all over the place suffering in their homes and so on. The so-called right holders, Mr. Speaker. In a place like Baringo North, in Baringo County, Simo location, a lot of fellows were displaced. So I think I want to agree that there is need for the committee to, and I think I'm a member of this committee, Mr. Speaker, and we are going to really do a lot in terms of ensuring that we don't only look at Otso's situation, but also what's happening in the country, so that we bring an end to the suffering of people and institutions without title deeds for their institutions. So I support, Mr. Speaker.
Let us get the last statement from Senator Christo Asige.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I also join the rest of the House in welcoming the delegations upstairs in the gallery. Though I wasn't a student, of course, at Raila'S School, I did spend a lot of time studying in the UK, Bristol specifically, which is famous for its harborside, the St. Paul's Carnival, and, Mr. Speaker, it has very, very good beer. So I hope that the delegation who are here, as I did, find a home away from home in Kenya. Mr. Speaker, I rise pursuant to Standing Order 53.1 to seek a statement from the Standing Committee on Labor and Social Welfare on claims of inaccurate data of persons with disabilities, PWDs, in official data collections efforts reflected in the National Census of 2019. In this statement, the committee should state the disability prevalence rate in Kenya, recorded in the last 4 years, disaggregating these figures into gender, age, type of disability, and county. State steps in place to ensure that all PWDs, including children under the age of 5, are properly accounted for in disability statistics and data collection efforts. Tabling evidence of capitation released to the NCPWD to cater for this special interest group in the last 4 years. Shed light on allegations that 413,620 PWDs who are counted in the National Census of 2009 were not accounted for in the census of 2019, stating measures in place to improve the accuracy and comprehensiveness to improve disability statistics. State targeted interventions to improve the current tools in use and training accorded to all enumerators to ensure full inclusivity and accounting of physical, sensory, and neurodiverse disabilities, both visible and invisible. And lastly, state plans to engage public and key stakeholders towards let me do that again. State plans to engage the public and key stakeholders toward audit census tools for the comprehensiveness of questions, designs, and categorization of disability status. I thank you.
Thank you. I can see some requests here, but I don't know whether they are in support of this statement by Senator Sige. Those who are not interested on this particular one, maybe you can withdraw the cans. Senator Manzo Daniel, very brief comments, just 2 minutes.
Yeah, brief, yes. I arise to support that statement by a wonderful senator. I want to say that the place of people with a disability in this country has been left without proper legal structures at times, whether they fall under national or county, and it's really been hard. But what I want to ask the senators and members of parliament is to give them a special place. Like you see, part of my employees, I have taken 1 or 2 people with a disability. It's one way of helping them and encouraging them. I have an adult who looks like a 7-year-old man, but he's an adult who works for my office. And we really need to support the cause of the people with disability, make sure that the ones who are hidden in the villages are produced, are come out and are able to participate, are able to go to school. And I believe as a wonderful senator is doing, who is very well learned and is able to become a senator. All these people have a chance and are able to, are very much able to do whatever a normal person can be able to do. So I support, and also Speaker, allow me to welcome the delegations and say that I went to Starehe Boys Center where we were brought up by a British soldier, a former British soldier, who brought up 15,000 poor boys who are big-time people in the world today. And I was also privileged to have my fees paid by Princess Anne, the daughter of the Queen of England. I thank you.
Thank you, Senator Manzo. Senator Bugwa Mungai George.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise here to support the statement by Senator Sige. And on the onset, want to state that, Mr. Speaker, data is everything. And because of the inaccurate statistics for the persons with disabilities in this country, the resources allocated to that sector have been dwindling over the years. And we are unable to get the services which are enshrined in the constitutions for persons living with disabilities because of the inaccurate data. So, Mr. Speaker, I support so that this sector can get what is rightfully theirs. Thank you.
Senator Baz Sheikh Mohammed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I support the statement from Honorable Sige. Mr. Speaker, you know this well, I'm in this country. We have so many disabled, but however, services and all work given to them is not actually adequate. And most instances have been neglected so much. It's a high time that this country should take serious and give a quota, as they have already enshrined in the Constitution, that the disabled, actually disability is not an inability. That actually shows Honorable Sige is perfectly in this house as a representative of the disabled group. And you can see how she contributes every day, and it's very, very active, and I want to congratulate her on that. It's a high time that we need to give space, we need to support the disabled, that we need to give them enough resources, so at least they can be able to contribute in the national national required functions that they're able to do. I remember when I was back when I was a member of parliament, I built a school for the disabled, especially for the deaf. And I'm really impressed today. Those students are actually doing a wonderful job. I was really impressed that they did very well. For the last 3 years, they did the KCSE, and they're performing very well. I think only the thing is that we're not giving enough opportunity and resources to the disabled persons. I therefore support the statement, and I need to be serious on these things, and this country needs to be serious on the issues of disability. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. The last one, Senator Sengo Karunda Beth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. I rise also to support this statement by Senator Christo Asike, aka VIP. Actually, in this country, we really need to support people who are differently abled. And they also contributing to the building of the nation. We know they are differently abled. They are talented differently. They can serve the nation also in a unique way. So we need to support them at both levels, at the national government, the county governments, and if actually a fund could be put forward to support them differently. Yesterday, Mr. Speaker, sir, I just wanted to know, as the argument is going forward about CDF, about GAF for the women reps, and also the kitty for senators. Can we also have a kitty for people living with disability in this country? This will support and encourage many to take leadership at different levels. I support the statement, Mr. Speaker, sir. Thank you.
Senator Madago Jackson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to support the statement sought by Senator Asike on the issues of persons with disability. Mr. Speaker, without proper data, it will be impossible for this country to be able to plan effectively for persons with disability. And Mr. Speaker, when you see statistics that are not consistent, it means even government interventions that are supposed to go towards supporting persons with disability in this country will be so inconsistent and doesn't make any meaningful progress, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I therefore rise to support the statement by Senator Asike that through the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, they need to supply proper data of persons with a disability. And Mr. Speaker, as I rise to support this statement, we also want to encourage families in this country, Mr. Speaker, who have persons living with disability or children with various disabilities, to make sure that those children are brought to the fore and are given opportunity to access education. We know in some cultures in this country that when people have children with disability, there's a tendency to hide those children, and probably that is also what would contribute to them not being counted during the census. But we want to urge Kenyans of all walks of life that having a child with disability does not mean that that child cannot make any meaningful contribution to this country. I can tell you, Mr. Speaker, having been a governor in Uasin Gishu County, we were able to recruit over 100 persons with disability. And I can tell you, amongst the best public servants we had are persons with disability. Mr. Speaker, if you visited the county government of Uasin Gishu in the executive, all our executive officers were being cleaned by deaf people. And I can tell you they were very effective and very efficient. As a nation, we need to properly plan for people with disability. And I want to reiterate here, Mr. Speaker, that there is need for compliance to the laws that have already been provided for. For example, Mr. Speaker, if you go to all government offices, accessibility to those offices are still a challenge. You therefore don't expect them to be able to seek services like other citizens with ease, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to support this statement, and the committee should further probe on other funds that has been set aside for persons with disability, particularly funds that go through the offices program, Mr. Speaker, because sometimes they don't end up in the intended recipients. Mr. Speaker, I rise to support this statement. Thank you.
The last one from Senator Mwalumba Jones Mwashushe. Senator Mwaruma.
There's a problem, okay. Yeah, Nashukuru Mheshimiwa Spika kwa kunipa hii fursa ili kuchangia taarifa ambayo imeletwa na seneta mteule, Seneta Asige, kuhusu mambo ya watu wanaoishi na ulemavu. Katika taarifa yake amesema ya kwamba hakuna takwimu za kutosha za watu wanaoishi na ulemavu. Na vile wasemaji wamesema, waliotangulia kusema, wamesema kwamba bila takwimu ama data hatuwezi panga mambo ya walemavu. Na kusema ule kweli, Mheshimiwa Spika, Kenya tuko na shida ya kuangazia ya watu wanaoishi na ulemavu. Leo tulikuwa tunahusisha wadau katika ile sheria, na tulipata mambo ya kushangaza sana ya kwamba kuna wanafunzi wengi ama wafanyikazi wengi katika mashule ambao hawajalipwa mishahara kwa miezi 9, 10 na zaidi. Mheshimiwa Spika, katika shule za wanaoishi na ulemavu zinahitaji walimu, lakini kando na walimu, Mheshimiwa Spika, wale wanahitajika ni wale kusukumwa sehemu moja hadi nyingine. Sukuma sana ile Ministry ya Labor na Social Welfare ipate kupata takwimu za kutosha na kuandikisha wale wote wanaoishi na ulemavu na kuhakikisha ya kwamba wameenda shuleni. Kwa hivyo Mheshimiwa Spika, nashukuru sana Senator Asige na anafanya kazi nzuri ya kupigania wale wanaoishi na ulemavu Kenya. Tutangojea hiyo ripoti ambayo itakuja kutoka kwa hiyo kamati, na najua mambo ya walemavu yatazidi, lakini hasa katika kila kaunti tupate takwimu ama data ya kutosha ya wale ambao wanaishi na ulemavu na zile pesa ambazo wanahitaji kupata kama kwa inua jamii wote wawe wanaweza kupata. Kwa hivyo nashukuru Mheshimiwa Asige na asante Mheshimiwa Spika kwa hiyo nafasi.
Senator Sigei, 2 minutes, kindly.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for this opportunity. I would like to also add my voice to the statement by the Honorable Senator Asige. Mr. Speaker, when we speak about the inaccuracy of the data about persons living with disability in this country, it is not only a matter of subject which speaks into the Social and Labor Committee. Mr. Speaker, the latest census that we had in this country has got a percentage of 2.2% of people living with disability. That translates to 0.9 million people. Failure to have an accurate data in itself, Mr. Speaker, affects the inability of the government of the day and any other government institution, whether at the county level or at the national level, to mainstream and operationalize the demands that persons living with disability require. Mr. Speaker, in 2018, there is the Global Summit where the government of Kenya undertook to implement and mainstream services, rights, and entitlements to persons with disability. And it is going to be very unfortunate because there is no way we can implement those commitments if we do not have the appropriate and accurate data on persons living with disability. I want to appreciate my colleague, Sister Senator Asige, for taking it up and also championing the rights of people living with disability. And in this case, I want to encourage the Labor Committee, whose responsibility this statement has been given, to ensure that it goes beyond just getting the data, but also going to confirm that that data is a representation of the people from the youngest to the person who is in their sunset years and they are disabled and they need the support of the government of the day. Mr. Speaker, I support and I thank the Honorable Senator Sige for the bold step that she took. Thank you.
Honorable Senators, the time allocated for statements is over. Actually, you are hinting into the other businesses time. So I kindly request the two senators who have put their requests maybe to take 1 minute each kindly. Senator Onyonka.
I would like to thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me the minute to speak. I am actually humbled to listen to what my brother Counsel and Madam Asige have raised about this matter. And I would like to raise this issue with the Labour Committee in this Senate to make sure that when they begin to pick views and they're beginning to engage, they involve as many of us as possible, because many of our counties, Mr. Speaker, don't have any data, information, and anything to do with people with disability until when the campaigns come. That's when we just call them and meet them around. I think we need to be more serious and let us take these challenges very deeply because they're affecting our people. Thank you, Madam Asige, for being a very good example of somebody who's been nominated to represent that community. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Professor Kamal Jebkoech.
Minutes to add my voice to the statement that was raised by Senator Asike. I want to thank her for doing this. Mr. Speaker, it is true that data doesn't seem to be correct. Not just the data of the people with disabilities, but even children with disabilities. Mr. Speaker, there has to be a way in which we can know our children from when they're young. And as the committee looks at that, let them also look at our schools, because some schools register children one term, the next term they have new children, they don't have other children. I think this question is very important because it's going to open our minds on which solutions we should really be dealing with, or how we are going to approach this. Because we also know, Speaker, that the issue of disability has been associated with witchcraft and has been associated with so many other things. The side that people are embarrassed, some children are being locked in rooms, some children are being closed. So looking for data is going to be a very challenging thing. We want to look for ways in which we can get to know who actually our disabled children are, people are. Finally, Mr. Speaker, we need to actually ask ourselves, is this the responsibility of a mother who gave birth to a disabled child, or it should be the responsibility of a nation that receives tax? We need to see how we can move that burden away from the parents, because Speaker, realize that if you have 4 children, one of them is disabled, you'll spend 50% of your time with the disabled child and 50% for the other 3 children, which means there are many challenges. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
All the statements start committing to the relevant committees, standing committees of this House. Honorable Senators, in the public gallery, we have 97 students accompanied by 6 teachers from high school in Nakuru County who are in the Senate on an education tour. Honorable Senators, in our usual tradition of receiving and welcoming visitors to Parliament, extend a warm welcome to them on behalf of the Senate and on my own behalf. Wish them a fruitful visit. Thank you. Next order.
Order number 8, the Natural Resources Benefit Sharing Bill, Senate Bills number 6 of 2022, second reading division.
Yeah, the delegations are not enough. We don't have enough numbers to get this vote. So, Senators, we concluded debate on this motion, and now I call upon the mover to reply. Senator Kajwan. Moses.
Mr. Speaker,
And Senator Okech, you should know when to raise point of order. I think the Speaker, Right Honorable Amason Kingi, has given very clear directions on when to raise a point of order. A point of order is raised when another member is contributing to anything, not just any time you raise point of order. What is in order and what is out of order?
Mr. Speaker, I respect your guidance, but a point of order can be raised any time. Sometimes, even on the matter that I want to raise point of order on, Mr. Speaker,
Under which standing order?
Mr. Speaker, yesterday I was instructed by your chair.
By my chair?
Yes, by the chair, by the Speaker. At the beginning of the business of this House, I was supposed to present evidence on the motion that I brought yesterday in this House with regards to the issue of national security in the country. And it is in our standing orders that for whichever names that a member of this House brings in any motion, there ought to be substantiated. And Mr. Speaker, that I thought would have been, when I didn't get any direction from your chair, I thought for the purposes of this House, as a House of record, it would be important for me.
Let us give Senator Kajwang time to reply. Then I'll give you some time to substantiate the issues that I am directed. There are some issues that you want to be substantiated.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Kajwang, let us conclude with this motion first.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to reply, having moved the motion on the bill for the County Vocational Education and Training, Mr. Speaker, I want to thank all my colleagues who have contributed to debate on this bill, from the Leader of Majority, who employed his institutional memory as a ranking member of the Finance Committee to tell the House the origins of this bill that we started processing in the last Parliament, but was not successful, and so we decided to revive it in this House. Mr. Speaker, the Leader of Majority cited the conditional allocation of 40 million per county that this House has appropriated for a period of 3 years. And we had realized that counties were receiving that money, and yet we didn't have a very good framework that would separate village polytechnics and homecraft centers from the purview of the TVET authority. Mr. Speaker, several other members contributed to the debate on the bill. Senator Mungatana brought the attention of the mover to certain litigation that has been ongoing with regards to employees of these village polytechnics and vocational centers, some of whom are still in the payroll of the national government. And Mr. Speaker, that was a very good observation, because we must ensure that as we devolve this function fully, we must also look at the human resource, and we must also look at the financial resources. Mr. Speaker, Senator Ledamo Lekina talked about the recognition of prior learning, and that this bill must attempt to entrench that in law. Mr. Speaker, I'm happy that the National Qualifications Authority, together with the TVET Authority, already are in conversation to ensure that prior learning can be recognized, so that that Otieno, who is a very talented panel beater somewhere in California, in Nairobi, can be formalized. Mr. Speaker, I believe those who are talking about hustlers and those who really believed in the agenda of hustlers would be happy if we can bring these people into the formal economy. And that can be done through recognition or prior learning, so that our experienced and our expert painters, experienced and expert mechanics, experienced and expert masons who do not have any certification can be recognized on their prior experience, and that can now allow them to tap into jobs in county governments and jobs in the formal sector. Mr. Speaker, there were a lot of observations. The Senator for Kiambu advised that we should not over-legislate for small businesses. Mr. Speaker, this legislation is to guide the establishment of vocational centers by county governments. There is still going to be space for private sector players. And Mr. Speaker, when it comes to vocational training, the private sector has played a very, very important role. It is not the intention of this bill to regulate every college or every apprentice operation or every training operation around the corner or every driving school. But, Mr. Speaker, in as much as we want a thriving private sector within the vocational training space, there has to be quality, there has to be standards, there has to be regulation, and we must ensure that there's consumer protection. And that consumer protection is protection of the students and pupils from exploitation by the owners of those institutions, especially those that are private. Mr. Speaker, more than 10 senators spoke to this bill. And I want to commit to the House that I will look at the Hansard very, very carefully. I will also look at the report of the Education Committee very carefully. And once again, I want to thank members of the Education Committee. They've done an excellent job. They have already drafted proposed amendments. And Mr. Speaker, I agree largely with most of those amendments. I also agree with many of the submissions that were made by members on the floor of this House. We will very, very quickly ensure that the necessary amendments are processed and that this bill can leave this House. And Mr. Speaker, I know Senator Mugatana has beaten me to the position of having his bill being the first being processed by the Senate. It doesn't matter. His bill is extremely important. This is extremely important. We should be seen to be sending legislation to the National Assembly, legislation that goes beyond those that are prescribed in the Constitution, like DORA and CARA. And I want to encourage my colleagues with private members' bills also to follow suit so that we can flood the inbox of the National Assembly with legislation that is meant to make devolution work. Mr. Speaker, I beg to reply, and pursuant to Standing Order 66.3, I beg that the putting of the question be deferred to a later date. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Okay, thank you. Permission granted. So we go to the next order. No, Senator Okech, where is he now to prosecute his matter? Senator Okech, you have the floor.
Thank you once again, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, yesterday I did bring a motion on under Standing Order number 37 on a matter of national importance, namely the deteriorating security situation in the country. And as I was moving my motion, Mr. Speaker, the Senator for Kakamega, Senator Boni Alwale, did question my evidence on a statement that I made in this House that some pronounced leaders of this country did make statements or pronouncements that was tantamount to inciting the public to the attacks that we saw in private property of President Uhuru Kenyatta and to the Prime Minister Raila'S property called Spectre. And Mr. Speaker, the chair did direct that I substitute that statement, for which the chair did ask that today I bring evidence to the same effect. Mr. Speaker, I'm on a point of order. Mr. Speaker, the Evidence Act does require under Section 8 that if I'm in a court of law, then I provide an affidavit to the same. But in the spirit also of this House, I want to recognize that social media statements, videos that are journalistic, as well as any publication that is journalistic, amounts to evidence. And Mr. Speaker, I'm going to table here an order from Office of the Director.
Allow him to table so that also
you respond what I've tabled. You don't just make noise.
If there are substance
Yeah,
from the
I am telling you what I'm tabling, my friend.
what is
Mr. Speaker, I'm on a point of order, Mr. Speaker. I haven't tabled anything. What is he responding
Just
to?
resume your seat, Senator.
It's
Okech.
becoming cantankerous.
Senator Okech, resume your seat.
I'm
to get
lecturing you because you are ignorant.
The point of order. Senator Okech, Senator Boni Karware, Senator Okech, both of you should be honoring in this House. Please, Senator Okech.
Mr. Speaker, I rose on a point of order to draw your attention to the fact of the requirements of Standing Order number 105, responsibility for a statement of fact. That's a standing order upon which Eddie was challenged. So far, Senator Eddie has spent 5 minutes, almost close to 10, explaining absolutely nothing, Mr. Speaker. If you read the provisions of Standing Order number 105, there is no justification or there is no requirement upon the senator to give an explanation of anything. All Senator Eddie needs to do, Mr. Speaker, and you need to read 105 too, is to say, Mr. Speaker, I hereby table the evidence, lack of which he's supposed to withdraw. That yesterday, the words of Senator Eddie Okech, Mr. Speaker, were that Mr. Rigathi Gachagua, together with Kimani Ichung'wa, who is a majority leader in the National Assembly, as well as Moses Kuria, who is a cabinet secretary, convened and made public pronouncements leading to these problems. They made public pronouncement to the extent then he was interrupted by a point of order. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, reading Standing Order number 105 too, can you guide that Senator Eddie Okech without telling us long stories that are not useful at this point? Can he table the evidence before us, Mr. Speaker?
Majority leader, actually, that is what I was requesting him to do, to table the evidence. Then we assess whether your evidence is admissible. So that if it is not, you go ahead to withdraw. Or you go to look for evidence and give you more time.
Mr. Speaker, I have watched my friend, Senator Arun Cheriot here, tabling things, and he explains what the things is tabling, Mr. Speaker. I am tabling, and I'm explaining what I'm tabling.
Can you table your evidence?
I talked about 3 issues that you cannot gag me just to table them without telling you what I'm tabling, Mr. Speaker.
Now,
okay?
Proceed and table the evidence.
Yeah, so I have to tell you what I'm tabling, my friend. Yeah, so, Mr. Speaker, the first evidence that I'm tabling, both in hard copy here, as well as in a flash disk of videos, Mr. Speaker, are pronouncements by Honorable Kimani Ichung'wa on 18th March 2023 at Kianyanga in Kirinyaga County. And I am also tabling here the pronouncement by Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua, stated that the government is a private company where, a number of them here on the 18th of February 2023 in Kericho County. And Mr. Speaker, I'm also tabling here statements by Honorable C.S. Moses Kuria on his Twitter handles, and there are a number of them, because I don't want to get majority whip worked up because I think this evidence are actually bothering him. And because I said a number of leaders, Mr. Speaker, I'm also tabling here, Honorable. And the bone is, don't be worked up.
So
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
as we scrutinize your evidence, we continue with the business of the day. No, wait. Next order. I'll see you next time. I'll see you next time. No, at this point you cannot raise a point of order, kindly, Senator Medo. Next order.
Order number 10, motion, amendment of the Senate calendar for the second session.
Majority Leader, this is your motion. Amendment of the Senate calendar. It's like your mind was moved by the previous contributor was on the floor.
Mr. Speaker, this is a motion that, notwithstanding the resolution of the Senate on the approval of the Senate calendar made on 16 February 2023, and noting the resolutions of the Senate made on Thursday, 23rd of March 2023, on the fifth report of the Procedure and Rules Committee on the amendments to the standing orders of the Senate, and pursuant to Standing Order number 32-4, the Senate resolves to amend its calendar, regular sessions of the Senate of the second session 2023 to provide for morning sittings on Wednesday, pursuant to Standing Order number 34. Mr. Speaker, sir, this is not the first time that the Senate will be sitting on Wednesday mornings. You will recall, Mr. Speaker, that previously we've had sessions where on Wednesday morning the Senate met and transacted business. But over the course of time, when it became clearly evident, Mr. Speaker, that members were more keen on being before committees in the morning hours of Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, and sometimes even Fridays, then as a House we did resolve, Mr. Speaker, to have our sittings just be on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays from 2:30 to 6:30, unless the House is otherwise moved, Mr. Speaker. But since this House has now adopted, Mr. Speaker, the provisions of the Standing Order in agreement to what our Procedures and Rules Committee proposed before the House to provide for Cabinet Secretaries to appear before this House, Mr. Speaker, we want to propose additional time for the Senate to meet so that we do not interrupt the Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays 2:30 that is mostly otherwise filled up, Mr. Speaker, either considering motions on various issues that are topical to the country, or statements that are being brought by members, Mr. Speaker, or bills, such as the bills that you want to consider this afternoon, Mr. Speaker. Therefore, it is in good order that I requested the SPC, and they agreed with us, that we move this motion to allow that the Senate does meet every Wednesday, and the questions as provided for in the motion that we moved here, Mr. Speaker, to provide for different cabinet secretaries to be notified way in advance of time, the questions that they shall be asked, so that members can show up in this House, Mr. Speaker, and we agree, depending on how the first 2 or 3 sessions will go, the length of time that you're going to spend, Mr. Speaker. These are things that we said that once we begin on the exercise, and depending on the interest of members and the questions and the issues that are arising from the constituents that we represent in this House, Mr. Speaker, we shall be able to determine how many, for example, cabinet secretaries we can have in a single Wednesday afternoon, and depending on the issues that have been brought before us. Mr. Speaker, therefore, this is a fairly straightforward matter. I do not see why anybody, Mr. Speaker, for whatever reason, will have a problem with it. But of course, I do not want to preempt debate. I want to leave it to the wisdom of the House to either agree with us, either as proposed or together with an amendment, Mr. Speaker, so that this House can meet on Wednesday mornings and consider, Mr. Speaker, that there is business that is actually long-standing and pending. Part of what we could do, Mr. Speaker, and we will be suggesting this to the Senate Business Committee, is that if you look through our order paper, Mr. Speaker, this afternoon, there are almost 10 to 20 motions that have been proposed by various colleagues, which because of the nature of how we transact business in this House, unfortunately, we have not been able to consider them. Some of these motions have been on the order paper for almost 3 or 4 months, and it's not right, Mr. Speaker. Part of what we could do on those mornings of Wednesday, Mr. Speaker, if you find that we have met and we have concluded on the business and members are satisfied that the business that had been slated earlier, our Cabinet Secretary has responded sufficiently, or asked for additional time, Mr. Speaker, to find better answers to bring before the House, we could as well consider other long-standing businesses that are before the order paper, Mr. Speaker, so that we don't have this practice where colleagues are proposing motions. I don't believe it is out of idleness, Mr. Speaker, or just for want of to fill up the order paper that colleagues propose motions before us. Therefore, it's unfair that we have kept some of these motions on the order paper for more than a month or two, Mr. Speaker. So giving the Senate additional time to meet means actually we shall be able to transact more business, Mr. Speaker, as a House. And therefore, I want to request colleague senators to agree with this proposal so that we can quickly be able to conclude on this business and move on to additional business. Of course, Mr. Speaker, I do know, and I want to appreciate your guidance yesterday, Mr. Speaker, because there had been an erroneous interpretation that by Cabinet Secretaries appearing before this House, Mr. Speaker, in a gathering of the plenary, that they are not required to appear before the committees as expected by Article 153 of our Constitution. I appreciate, Mr. Speaker, that yesterday you gave clear guidelines that Cabinet ministers will still appear before our committees of Parliament, the committees of Senate, Mr. Speaker, to respond to other ordinary business that was pending or that will arise in the course of members of the various committees going about their duties, Mr. Speaker. That lays to rest that particular matter. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, given that this is a fairly straightforward matter, I do not intend to be long about it because I believe it's something that colleagues can read, understand, and appreciate it. With those very many remarks, Mr. Speaker, I beg to move and request that the Senator for Kakamega, the Dr. Boni Halwale, to second. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Boni Karwale.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, sir, I rise to second this motion as moved. Mr. Speaker, it was Michael Kijana Wamalwa, the late Vice President of the Republic of Kenya, who, while speaking from this dispatch box, said, in politics, if it is possible, it's always good to let a good idea yield to a better idea. It is true, our old calendar has served us very well. It's been a good idea. But if we can allow it to yield to the new calendar as proposed by the Leader of the Majority, Mr. Speaker, it will be a better idea. Why? Only time is going to prove us right. Honorable members, in the good old days, Assembly, we had a session reserved for questions. And when we opened up Parliament to public transmission of proceedings, that became the most watched part of the proceedings of this House. I therefore want to confirm that Wednesday mornings will be the most popular day in the calendar of this House every week. And Senator Onyonga was there. He remembers when he was Assistant Minister for Foreign Affairs, and I was Assistant Minister in charge of the East African community. And by the way, Assistant Ministers of Mwai Kibaki were actually deputy ministers. I support this motion. I second this motion, and I want to appeal to members that there is so much value in one raising a question on gold mining in Kakamega directly to the minister in charge, and him not only responding, but opening an avenue for the senator of Migori, for example, to then ask a supplementary question about mining in Migori. This is the point. This is the point. And Mr. Speaker, because we want to ask for more and get more, the saying goes, to those who more is given, more is expected of them. And therefore, members, I want to appeal that again, the usual headache of quorum when we open session, let it not remove the wind from our sails. We should try and be here. And when I look, most of the members in this house, what is the median age here? The median age here could be around 41, 40, 41? Yeah, very young people. Why would you still be in bed at that time? I remember in the other parliament, when the senator of Meru was arguing his case, he used to say he starts functioning best at around 1 o'clock.
Senator,
The former senator of Meru.
Senator Mudhamia, who was in 1963.
No, I mean the
Murungi,
second senator.
And Senator Muthaiga
Great.
Linturi.
Yes, great.
Which
He
one?
used-
Which
he used
senator?
to- Kiraitu-
For the purpose of record, because I did
Yeah,
not
yeah,
hear
yeah.
this.
I'm very specific and factual.
Kiraitu Murungi.
It was Senator Kiraitu Murungi who used to amuse us from this house that he starts functioning best at around 1 o'clock. So we don't have that problem anymore. Even me, who has more years than most of you, I am in the element of a bullfighter. Bullfighters, we start feeding our bulls at 4 a.m. in the morning. And after I finish feeding the bulls, I normally support my workers in milking my cows. I have got my favorite cow. It is called a tambo. A tambo likes it when I'm milking myself. So we are people who wake up early. Amida, you are killing me with your laughter. So, Mr. Speaker, sir. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, with those many words, I want to second that this motion sees the day of the light. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Honorable Senators, I propose a question that notwithstanding the resolution of the Senate on the approve the Senate calendar made on 16th February 2023, and noting the resolution of the Senate made on Thursday 23rd March 2023 on the 5th report of the Procedure and Rules Committee on the amendments of the standing orders of the Senate, and pursuant to standing order that the two calendar regular sessions of the Senate for the second session 2023 to provide for morning sittings on Wednesdays pursuant to standing order 34. Senator Kibwana Ali Aminda, continue amusing the majority whip.
Asante Bwana Spika. No, na mimi nataka kuunga mkono tu upande majority leader akisema kuwa tunafaa kuendelea kufanya kazi. Kusema kweli, sisi wengine ni watu wa mkono, ni technical people na si watu wa siasa sana. Kwa hivyo tungetaka kweli motions nyingi ziko. Kama Bwana Spika, kuanzia wiki moja imepita, niko na statement yangu na niko na motion na mpaka sasa haijafika. nimeona vitu vingi kweli havijakuwa sawa. Kuna motion kama ya dada yetu Senator Gloria, na kusema kweli hii motion ni kitu ya maana sana ya wasichana wetu kuwa na hii mambo ya sanitary towels. Nimeona motion nyingine ya Senator Kavindu, mambo ya 1998 bombing compensation. Kwa hivyo naona kusema kweli kuna mambo mengi sana yamechelewa sana kwa sisi kuendelea na kazi zetu. Kwa hivyo hapo nitamuunga bwana majority leader mkono kwa hii kazi tu, kusema kweli iweze kuendelea. Asante bwana Speaker.
Sasa tumsikize Seneta wa Baringo Kipkorir William Cheptumo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to support this motion. Mr. Speaker, this motion is fairly straightforward, actually. We've amended our standing orders already. And what we are doing is to, Mr. Speaker, this House is to represent the counties and serve to protect the interests of the counties and their governments. I agree we do so through the statements, but I think, Mr. Speaker, motions and the bills are equally critical in us as a House serving our counties. Mr. Speaker, I have two motions. I think they are before you for approval. And already one member has already spoken about another one. Shortly, Mr. Speaker, the paper will be full of so many motions to deal with them, Mr. Speaker. So I support this so that, Mr. Speaker, we are able to deal with time. The issue of the cabinet secretary that I happen in this is people with the cabinet. This is the very I Bonnie Kalwale, as I recall, we were together with him when he was Assistant Minister for Health, if I'm not wrong. I was deputizing the Minister for Justice. Mungatana, I think, was Deputy Minister in some ministry. And Mr. Speaker, I want just to tell my colleagues, you will see how exciting that moment will be, because it will be direct conversation with the ministers. And during that time, Mr. Speaker, I remember I helped a lot of colleagues in establishing courts in various parts of the country, including even where you come from, Mr. Speaker. So I really want to support this, and I think this is a motion that we need to approve it as quickly as possible, Mr. Speaker, so that then we move, so that we have our matters, we have more time to deal with the matters before the House. I support Speaker.
Senator Kajwang Moses.
Mr. Speaker, this is a procedural motion. And the best practice for procedural motions usually is for the leader of majority to move and get a member of the other side to second. Because I believe that this is a matter that was discussed in the Senate Business Committee. It is a matter that ideally should not be contentious. I know we have been consulting here on whether Standing Order 32 and Standing Order 34 have been violated by this move. And I know that my colleagues will be prosecuting that matter. But in our Senate, where we have spent more time fighting than finding common ground, Mr. Speaker, I want to encourage the majority leader that on such procedural matters, that we can have some bipartisanship so that you can have both sides speaking to it. Mr. Speaker, the debate that prompted this amendment to the Senate calendar was rancorous and was contentious. We had our say, the majority had their way. And what we said about the intent of getting cabinet secretaries to this House, Mr. Speaker, has gone on record. It is in the Hansard, and I don't think this is a motion for us to speak to the issues that we already prosecuted while debating the report of the Rules and Procedure Committee. Mr. Speaker, this is quite unavoidable since last week that resolution was carried. But it's going to have some impact on some of the busy committees, especially committees that have scheduled their activities and meetings into the next quarter. And some of those are like the Public Accounts Committee that I chair, the Public Investments Committee, which has a fairly busy schedule. And so, Mr. Speaker, from time to time, we might be seeking the leave of the Speaker to have meetings even when the grilling of cabinet secretaries is going on. Mr. Speaker, last week, I saw something very interesting. The former Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Boris Johnson, was called before the Rules Committee of the House of Commons. And the Speaker, in a session that lasted 3 hours and 45 minutes, the former Prime Minister, a man who was extremely powerful, a man who was extremely pompous, was reduced to the level of a witness before a committee. And the interesting thing is that being a parliamentary system, the former Prime Minister was appearing before a committee of his peers in the Conservative Party and his other peers from Labour Party. We should know and we should institutionalize that being in the executive does not make you a special animal in this country. Mr. Speaker, we should encourage those people who have had the good favor and the privilege of serving this country in the executive. Yes, they've got access to resources, they've got access to decisions that can enrich, decisions that can impoverish, decisions that can change people's lives. They must remember that those functions that they exercise on behalf of the people of Kenya. And Mr. Speaker, every time we talk about the people of Kenya, we refer to Article 1 of the Constitution. And many a times I've heard people say that that right has been given to me by the Constitution. Mr. Speaker, there are countries without constitutions. The right is not given by the Constitution, the right is given by God. The Constitution is a mere record of that right and the social contract between the led and the leaders. Mr. Speaker, when the cabinet secretaries come to this House, I said it last week, that perhaps they will regret why they came here. Mr. Speaker, I've sat with many members across the divide when interrogating financial accounts from governors. And Mr. Speaker, when the Senate is on one side and the executive is on the other side, what I've seen is excellent bipartisanship. I want to encourage everyone in this House, when a cabinet secretary comes here, do not look at him as Kenya Kwanza, do not look at him as a man from your tribe, do not look at him as a friend of yours. Let the Senate be the Senate. And that is why in the editorial of yesterday's newspapers, Mr. Speaker, if you saw the editorial cartoon, parliamentary oversight was depicted as a corpse lying on a slab with many daggers on its back. Mr. Speaker, that tells you the mood of the public as far as the role of this parliament is concerned. Let us use this opportunity for us to rise above parochial and partisan interests. Let us use this opportunity to convince the nation that legislative oversight that was depicted as lying comatose on a slab has been revived, and that this Senate will be that house where, because we are fewer, we are able to make more meaningful questions, we are able to guide conversation, we are able to put the executive to task. Mr. Speaker, there have been many ways, avenues for policy positions to come to this House. Just last week, we approved the budget policy statement. Every year, the president is required to come to parliament to make an exposition of public policy. And Mr. Speaker, the motion that follows a presidential address is that the Senate to register its thanks to the president for exposition of public policy contained in the presidential address. There has been no shortage of opportunities for public policy to be brought here. We are going to use this chamber, that is assuming no one goes to court and invalidates what we did last week. We are going to use this chamber. So Speaker, I'm not trying to threaten anybody, but it's going to be a torture chamber for those who have the habit of misusing the instruments of power that they wield. It will be an accountability chamber for those who think that they can hide in their ivory towers and run away from the public. It will be an accountability chamber for those who think that for a senator to see them, they must make an appointment 3 days or 4 days, and then they go there and they're kept waiting for 6 hours. We will meet here, Mr. Speaker, and we will ensure we squeeze out of them the accountability that Kenyans expect, and we shall ensure that we are not going to have a rogue government that will be running this country from ivory towers, will be running this country from the executive, and some of them, Mr. Speaker, as you know, are people we competed against in the last elections. You work very hard to become a member of the Senate. The person you vanquished becomes a cabinet secretary, and then they are the ones who are lording it over you. You work very hard to become the senator for Meru, and then the person you vanquished becomes a CAS, Mr. Speaker. And then when it comes to order of precedence, the CAS is now more powerful than the senator who defeated him in the last elections. These are things we must fix, Mr. Speaker. And I want to encourage Senator Dr. Boni Khalwale. In the past parliament, he came up with an order of precedence bill. We must revive that order of precedence so that those people who are political losers out there, and they are still Kenyans, they can get other opportunities, but they cannot lord it over the people who have been selected by the public to represent them here. Mr. Speaker, my final concern, that this House must and can only admit a cabinet secretary who is appointed as per the Constitution and who has been vetted by the National Assembly as required by the Constitution. Let nobody bend the rules to bring in chief administrative secretaries and all sorts of characters to this House. Mr. Speaker, I am supporting this motion on that the Senate Business Committee has discussed, and there has been unanimity on the matter. On that basis, I support.
Thank you, Senator Kajwang. Senator Sigei Wakiri, Ilali.
Thank you once again, Honorable Speaker. I want to support the Majority Leader in the context of the amendment of this House standing orders, not standing orders, but calendar, sorry, so that we facilitate the appearances of the cabinet secretaries on Wednesday morning in the sitting so that they answer to questions which honorable members have put forward regarding their respective ministries. I have listened through the comments and contribution by the Honorable Senator Kajwang, and I want to confirm to him that indeed the House Business Committee sat, debated on the issues, the pros and cons, and the reasons which were put forward as to why we need these cabinet secretaries to appear before this House. I am alive to the fact that this House also debated in the course of the motion to amend the standing orders. It was acrimonious, but at the end of the day, Mr. Speaker, this House is mandated to make sure that the people who've been given mandate as cabinet secretaries are responsible for what happens in their ministries. That responsibility, Honorable Speaker, can only be achieved when the said cabinet secretaries are called upon by the House to appear and respond substantively to the questions with which the honorable senators have asked. And these questions, Mr. Speaker, I am aware, are questions regarding the performance by those cabinet secretaries in their ministries on the roles which Kenyans expect them to do.
Mr. Speaker, I am equally aware that there is an issue that was raised as regards the appearances by the cabinet secretaries in the House being non-members to this House. And I want to convince the members that that conversation, Mr. Speaker, was in the context of a misunderstanding of the persons who will be expected to appear before this House. And the order is, Mr. Speaker, as put clearly by the Honorable Senator Kajwang, that the only people who will appear in this House are the cabinet secretaries who are constitutionally appointed, vetted by the National Assembly, sworn into office, are the only ones who will appear here. We do not expect any other character, any other person other than a cabinet secretary to appear in this particular House. This House, under the Constitution, has got its membership established. That appearance cannot be construed as the person coming as a member of this House. It is a member who has been summoned to appear to answer to questions relevant to their delivery of services to the people of Kenya. Mr. Speaker, as I support this motion, I also want to encourage the members of this House to heed the provisions of those standing orders so that we ensure that the questions that we put forward are questions that will support the performance of the House in its role in oversight and in ensuring that the people of Kenya are actually served, specifically provided for, the kind of questions, how they are supposed to be put forward, and, Mr. Speaker, the opportunity to grant members additional time for supplementary questions gives us an opportunity beyond the written question that has been sent to ensure that if the said cabinet secretary is not sufficiently responding to the question, the member will have that opportunity to do it. I want to encourage the members to seize the opportunity and make sure